Hey guys, I just went ahead and fully finished Monster Hunter Wilds, the entirety of the story. I'm talking, after the initial credits, all the way up through chapter 6. Got to endgame, saw what endgame was about, and I think I ended off at HR like 50 or so after about like 35 hours, right around there. So let me give you my pros, my cons, and then my final verdict of the game. Should be prefaced that I am a massive fan of Monster Hunter. While World was my first Monster Hunter and I put well over 1,000 hours into it, I then went back, I played Generations Ultimate, Freedom Unite, I played a bunch of the older games as well, played Rise, so I am a big fan when it comes to the Monster Hunter, so I'm going to preface that ahead of time. I think this is a very worthy successor to World, but it is played very safe. There's not a lot of crazy brand new things here, but if you're a fan of World, you'll be a fan of this game. And let me tell you why. My first pro is that the combat and the additions that they've made to all of the weapon types that I played are really, really welcome. I main Greatsword, and through basically the entire game, I just used Greatsword. But in the beta, I tried several weapon types out, and I was a big fan of everything that they've added. Greatsword in particular didn't really get the most, but it did get what's a new mechanic called an offset attack, and that is essentially a parry. A bunch of weapons got this, and if you time the offset attack right when you're getting hit, you'll have a really cool cinematic like explosion moment that the monster will be knocked back, it'll be stunned, and it's very, very satisfying when you do it. Also, Greatsword can now actually block. For the longest time, blocking has just been terrible with the Greatsword, but now they've added what's called Perfect Guard to a lot of the weapons that have a block function, and as long as you perfectly block right when you're getting attacked, you'll have significantly more damage mitigation, less flinch, and it also functions almost like a parry. I also think the quality of life here is fantastic when it comes to several of the new additions. Now, you can utilize your Clutch Claw to grab items. You no longer have to, like, run over to them. They have the Sacred, which you do have to fiddle with some of the settings to get it to kind of do what you want it to, but once you figure out the settings, the Sacred allows you to easily maneuver from point A to point B. You can either do it manually yourself or you can do it automatically, which is really nice. And that paired with the ability to sharpen and heal while you're on the Sacred, while you're moving, is very similar to like Monster Hunter Rise when you had your doggy, right? They also have, in terms of quality of life, the ability to aim while you're attacking. And this is probably the biggest deal when it comes to Greatsword because, for the longest time, we've been kings of whiffing. Well, now, if you whiff, you have to be really, really bad. And I do understand some people's complaints that this lowers the skill ceiling. It makes many weapons significantly easier. It makes positioning less important. And I hear those complaints. I do. Don't get me wrong. But I think in terms of just the quality of life, it is so extremely nice. It's going to be really difficult to go back to something like World where you no longer have that free aiming. I also think a big strength of this game is the monster variety. I think they definitely listened to the complaints when it came to World about a lot of wyverns. Almost everything was wyverns, and it was almost like a Jurassic Park game a lot of the time. Well, no longer. You have squiddy boys. You have weird, floaty, funky things. I don't even know how to describe them. You have a monkey. You have a bunch of more variety when it comes to monsters, and I think that that is definitely one of the highlights of the game. Lots of new monsters. Just straight up new monsters. Monsters I've never seen. As well as some, returning fan favorites, but a lot less returning fan favorites than I thought. There's a lot of new monsters here, and I really like them. The sound design here is fantastic. They definitely, once again, listen to the feedback from the beta, the audio, as well as the visual feedback when you're hitting the hit stop and everything, the sound effects when you hit an offset attack, the music that plays in the background while you're going ham on these monsters for hundreds and hundreds of hours. All of it is fantastic. Voice acting, not so much. We'll talk about that in the cons, though, of course. And for me, my final pro that I'll say about the game is that it's fun, man. It's very, very fun. I had a great time playing through, and while it may have not taken a ton of risks and it may have not done anything insane, it is definitely a worthy successor in terms of fun to Monster Hunter World, and I'm very excited to see future content, whether that be collaboration events, event quests, and of course the eventual master rank and expansion that'll probably come in like a year and a half or 2 years. But let's get on to the cons. First thing we have to talk about when it comes to cons, I know I've beat this horse already. Every tech YouTuber has built this horse to death already, but I have to mention it. The performance on PC is quite terrible, especially in the later game areas. When you're fighting some of the later game monsters, it is just unacceptable. There needs to be performance enhancements. I think the best allegory that I can give, or the best example I can give, is that Monster Hunter Wilds is a lot like a fat girlfriend. I've dated fat girls before, and they can have fantastic personalities. They could be really funny. They could be great conversationalists. You can love them, but you're never gonna, say that they're not fat, or that they're like a supermodel or something, right? You're not gonna lie, and that's the case with Monster Hunter Wilds. This game does not look great. It's in fact a pretty ugly game, even with the massive 75 gigabyte high textures DLC. It's still a pretty damn ugly game by modern standards, and it doesn't run great. Now, you can hide a lot of those performance problems behind your fake frames with FrameGen, but while the game is very fun, and while the performance issues are not going to upset a lot of people out there, and that's totally fine, and you can absolutely have a great time with a game that runs like shit or that looks like shit, and maybe your definition of runs like shit is different from my definition of runs like shit, and every other tech YouTuber, whether that's Benchmark King, Digital Foundry, everyone else, that's totally fine. But the game doesn't run as well as it should for how it looks. There's no denying that. So on console, this is not really an issue. But if you are on PC and you don't have top-end hardware, just expect to be getting probably 60, if not sub 60 FPS, and your game to be looking really, really bad. The other obvious downside here is the story. This is the worst story I've played in a Monster Hunter. Pretty head and above heels worse than every other Monster Hunter game. I actually really enjoyed the Monster Hunter World story, even though the handler was awful and very annoying. But take the handler and everything you hated about her, times it by 10, and you have Nada. Nada is one of the most dislikable characters I have seen in a story mode for a game in quite some time. I despise that little child. I wanted to feed him to the monsters basically the entire game. And boy, oh boy, is it a good thing that Gemma and Alma are so goddamn hot, because they really carried a lot of the story elements. And obviously Capcom knew what they were doing, because every other Monster Hunter game, you never ever bring your blacksmith along with you. However, the one game that they decide to make the blacksmith turbo hot is also the game where the blacksmith follows you everywhere. Coincidence? Probably not. My final con here is just that I do wish they did something a little bit different. And I wish that they took more of the stuff from Iceborne, specifically the end game content in Iceborne with the guiding lands, and I wish that they brought that over here. I don't know how much this end game that is currently in the game is going to satisfy people. Yes, I can't really talk about it too much without spoiling things, but it's very similar to what was in the vanilla game of Monster Hunter World. And maybe they thought that would be enough and that would be acceptable, but for me, if you make a system that's significantly better, like they did in Iceborne with guiding lands, maybe let's just put that in the follow-up game instead of holding it off for what I'm assuming they're going to do, which is the DLC. Also, a lot of people have been complaining about the game being too easy. It is definitely the easiest Monster Hunter that I've played. There's no doubt about that. It's hard to say exactly if it's because of all the new quality of life changes, like being able to, ride around on your Sacred while sharpening, while healing, like having a lot of weapons having parries now and with the offset attacks, being able to block with the greatsword, being able to fully aim with the greatsword. It's hard to say, but I believe somebody did a HP comparison, and it's actually just an objective fact that monsters in this game have significantly less HP than they did in World. You're routinely seeing people that are not even that good at the game getting like 7, 6, 5-minute hunts, which is pretty crazy. I did a hunt against 2 tempered monsters that were not even like pushover starter monsters, 2 tempered monsters with not optimal gear that was several rarities under what it should be, not great decorations, and it was like a 9-minute hunt. I mean, that's pretty insanely fast. So I would like to see them maybe bump up the HP a little bit. I feel like the damage is fine when it comes to later in the game. Things can definitely hit like a truck, so I don't really think that was too big of a problem. But I would like to see just a little bit more health on things. I don't think, at least for me, Monster Hunter doesn't have to be turbo difficult, especially not the low rank and the high rank stuff. I expect that out of the event quests, the arc tempered, you know, event quests, monsters, and stuff like that. And I expect that after probably collaboration events like we got with Behemoth, or obviously when the expansion comes out with Master Rank. But I did figure I would mention it is definitely a little bit on the easier side for the game. Overall, my thoughts are, I think this is a great game. I think it's a worthy successor to Monster Hunter World, and I'm really excited to see what they do with the future of the game, how they continue to support it, and you know, what the event quests, what the collaborations, what all of that is going to be, because I think the foundation that they have here is very, very good. However, it does ultimately feel more like Monster Hunter World 1.5 instead of Monster Hunter World 2.0. They do not really execute upon the open world promises that they really hyped up. It doesn't come into play really at all in the game, because you're just going to fast travel to the different biomes anyway. With the quests, you're never ever really just going to ride from point, you know, this biome to this biome. I don't see why you would ever do that. I talked to several people, none of them ever did that. So I think they didn't really execute on that massive open world that they promised, but the foundation is here. It just doesn't take the risks that I would like to see. You know, Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate, you have styles, and that really adds a unique twist to all of the different weapon types. Monster Hunter World obviously innovated in terms of large zones and no longer needing a load screen in between those zones, and the more realistic nature of the game. Monster Hunter Rise, whether you like it or not, innovated pretty big time when it came to having your doggy and your palico, and also the wire bug and everything with the wire bug. This game doesn't really have any of that like blow you away brand new thing. They definitely played it safe here, but I still think it's a great time. I still think it's worthy of your time. For me, this is an 8 out of 10. You know, for my rating scale, a 5 is average, 6 is above average, 7 is good, and 8 is great. I think this is a great game. If you're wondering what I would have given World, Day 1 Vanilla World, I'd say that's probably like a 9.5 for me. I really think that the story was significantly better in World. I like the biomes more. I thought that the end game through the weapon augmenting system and everything that was there was a little bit more in depth, not much more in depth, but a little bit more in depth. And I do prefer the original, or the World version of Investigations, which they have changed up quite a bit when it comes to this game. But let me know what you guys think. I'd love to hear your opinions. I think it's a solid game, definitely worth your time. Check it out if you liked World. If you didn't like Monster Hunter, this was probably not going to convert you though. I'm not going to lie. It is definitely more of the same. But have a fantastic rest of your day, and I'll see all of you in the next video or stream Marooney. Bye-bye.